If you've ever had any experience working in a group, you would notice that a large majority of productivity comes from a small portion of group members, while the other majority does very little to contribute to the overall success of the project. You may also notice this in your personal life. Perhaps only a few things in your life bring you almost all of your discomfort. Of all the bills you have to pay, maybe only rent makes you anxious. This phenomenon is known as a Pareto distribution, and it is present in almost any system where a population is attaining a common goal. It was first discovered in 1896 when a man named Vilfredo Pareto, hence the name, was detailing the amount of property owned by the population in Italy. In modern times, it is a ubiquitous phenomenon being used in economics, computer science, and mathematics. It manifests itself as a subset of around 20% of a given group, creating 80% of that group's productivity. For example, in baseball, 15% of the players create 85% of the victories, while the other 85% of players create the remaining 15% of wins. It is a pretty interesting phenomenon that is worth looking into if you have the time. The reason why I assert that it created MGTOW is because it applies to biology as well. It has been shown that about 8,000 years ago, after the advent of agriculture, 17 women reproduced per one male that reproduced. If this is true, then we see a Pareto distribution here as well. A small percentage of the men are reproducing with a large majority of women, while the other subset of men have to fight for the leftovers. It is important to note that this is after the advent of agriculture, and thus it was very common for one man or family to own a large plot of land with almost all of the crops. It is no wonder why one man got so many women. He was essentially the only source of resources. Female hypergamy would only allow them to reproduce with him, since he was the top tier man. Here, we can see the human's natural proclivity towards being a tournament species. A tournament species is a species in which the pursuers, in this case the males, compete for sexual access from the pursued, in this case the females. The man who wins in this tournament gets access to all of the women, because the other males they were competing against are rejected by the women. The women hang around at the finish line and fuck the winners. This is not unique to humans though. We see it in hippos, mountain gorillas, and lions among others. So you may be wondering, why are humans considered monogamous then? After all, we have been monogamous for the past 10 to 20,000 years. Well, among closer inspection, it is found that only 17% of human cultures are strictly monogamous. Here we see that Pareto creeping in the corner, telling us what we already suspected. Monogamy accounts for a small subset of the population, but that population is by far the most productive. We know this since we see the data coming from the children of single mothers. If you examine a bit more, you will also notice that monogamy only creeps up when resources become scarce for everyone. This was the case 20,000 years ago because agriculture hadn't been invented yet, and so hunting and gathering were the primary sources of food. If you were a woman during this time, it was more beneficial for you and your offspring to mate with a man that would be able to provide for you, since you'd be unable to do it yourself. Women are not capable of taking care of themselves, especially when they are pregnant, or have these needy, smaller humans to watch all day. And thus, monogamy became the dominant strategy, because monogamous couples created the most successful offspring. So what about modern society? Monogamy worked for the generations in the past, so it should work for our current generation as well, right? Well, I have some good news and some bad news. I'll start with the good news, which is that you'll be able to save yourself a couple $100,000, since you won't have a parasite sucking the money out of your wallet. The bad news is that we have already started the transition from a pair bonding species to a tournament species. Look at this data from OkCupid. For the men, as expected, it's a nice normal distribution. If I didn't know better, I would say that this data is fixed in some way. However, I am well aware that men are more varied than women in terms of standards, so this is to be expected. The interesting data comes from the female perspective. It's brutal, isn't it? Starting from the 12% that is average and adding up everyone above that, we see that women consider 19% of men to be average or above average. I think I smell a Pareto distribution once again. This manifests itself in the term Chad, coined by the red pill community. Women only reproduce with these top-tier men because they are behaving as they should when resources are abundant. Because the only reason they would ever need pair bonding was to secure survival. Now women can be more or less independent, so she has no need to bond with a male, so she instead goes for the highest value male she can find. The reason why I say we are not fully tournament yet is because they still want to settle down once they fail to secure a top 20% male, choosing to go with men she doesn't even find attractive. The legislation is on her side here as well. She can divorce the beta and then have access to his resources without having to deal with him hindering her sexual escapades. Now, I personally wouldn't give a flying fuck about what these women do with their time if their bitching was disregarded. However, them leeching off government services for their bastard children causes taxes to go up for everyone, so I'm inclined to say that they should be responsible and close their legs for at least 5 minutes. The amount of benefits they can claim are honestly absurd. They're effectively rewarded for destroying their own lives. Since they are all letting the same guy rearrange their insides on the weekend, they are also spreading STDs further than before, even going so far as to create super gonorrhea. Their behavior is harmful to everyone, even those who do not condone or participate, because they still cost us money to support via taxes. If you haven't gone monk yet and still pump and dump, you have a significantly higher risk of getting the itch you just can't scratch. Either that, or she can just falsely accuse you of rape since she felt used by you and wanted you to be her provider. This rampant debauchery also caused the INCEL community to emerge, since the remaining 80% of men have to fight tooth and nail for the leftover 20% of women. In a monogamous society, this problem was circumvented since the women would be able to pair off with a man, so almost every man had a wife to provide for. However, in a tournament setting, there are bound to be many guys who get absolutely nothing. And on some level, I really can't blame them, at least for their failure. A lot of these PUA guys will say dumb shit like, "Oh, if you maintain frame, bro, she'll be all over you, bro." Completely disregarding the fact that the process that goes on in her head before you've even uttered a word decides if you even stand a chance of being with her. She immediately compares you to the mountains of men she's given herself to in the past, and her hypergamy dictates that if you are not better than all of them, then you are not worth her time. No amount of frame or game will manage her female nature. If you are not a 20%er, then you are likely wasting your time. If you are, then she only sees you as a number in her head anyways, so she still won't love you. Not only that, but the aforementioned STDs show that she is likely to give you a care package between those walls. Honestly, your best option is just to go MGTOW, dude. What most men don't even understand is that women today are not worth the time or resources necessary for the courtship in the first place. That is why MGTOW is a thing, and that is why you should, at the very least, even if you don't follow the ideology, ask yourself what life is worth. How much do you value your time? If you have any sort of self-love, you will not settle for less. And maybe you might even try to find the fabled unicorn that is somewhere out there, I'm sure. But just know this. Every second you spend chasing a fantasy, that is a second that you are not spending manifesting your dream into a reality. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. I kind of like this analytical style of video because I actually learn a bit in the process. As for the gameplay, I'm probably going to start phasing that out since I want to improve my editing skills, so relying on the gameplay is really holding me back there. Also, if I sound a bit more agitated in this video, it's because I had to record this twice since the first recording sounded like garbage. It turns out that switching your recording location has a lot to do with the sound quality, which I could probably have expected, but whatever. Other than that, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this. And as always, stay prosperous.